We will now move on to the third party. I will use this opportunity to remind all committee members and all people present to direct their comments through the chair. Mr. McIver, do you wish to share your time with the Premier?
If it's okay with the Premier, I'll share time.
Absolutely.
Okay, please
so
proceed.
we'll go then. Thank you. Well, Premier, I've got some other questions, but I have to pick up on something you just said, the climate change program, the single biggest policy announcement in a long time, something you said something along those lines. So, because I was going to ask you along the way, have you backed off from that? And the reason I would ask that is it was only mentioned once in the throne speech. I thought maybe you were running away from the climate change plan because you hardly talked about it at all in the throne speech.
No, not at all. We are moving forward. As you know, we are moving forward with the Energy Efficiency Agency. We just announced a very credible and exciting selection for the chair of that agency. We're moving forward with the programs that I believe a lot of folks on your side of the aisle haven't necessarily been in support of, but we think that Albertans are. We're moving forward with a number of different elements of the Climate Change Leadership Plan, and I'm sure that you'll have a chance to talk more about that with the Minister of Environment when her estimates come up. But far from it, we think it's an important initiative, as you've heard us say before, but it bears repeating because, you know, it's right from the horse's mouth. It contributed significantly to our ability to get the federal government to approve the pipeline, the Kinder Morgan pipeline to West Coast Tidewater, something which is fundamentally important to renewing the confidence in our oil and gas sector and from investors, and because at the end of the day, as much as people understand that the price of oil is a problem right now, long-term investors in the oil sands understand that they can actually make money at a much lower rate of the oil price over the long term. But that the real concern was that as a country we couldn't get our act together to find a way to get that product to the markets that those people were investing on behalf of or interested in accessing. So getting that pipeline to Tidewater is absolutely critical, and it's very clear by the Prime Minister of the country who approved that pipeline that it wouldn't have happened in the absence of our climate leadership plan. So we remain very committed to that plan and very committed to that principle.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that they chose to cancel the Northern Gateway as a trade-off for doing that, and that is unfortunate. Now, the other thing I have to ask you about that too is that you called it a levy instead of a tax, and it occurs to me that if you called it a tax, which it is, then you would have saved Albertans several $1 million in GST that they have to pay now. Because of course the federal government doesn't tax tax on a tax, but since you've called it a levy, that's it's my understanding is it's cost Albertans very many millions of dollars, and that of course is a concern, and I can assure you that the Albertans I talk to are in no way in favor of the climate change plan that you've foisted upon them. Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the Speaker about the Public Affairs Bureau, and I heard the exchange between the Leader of the Official Opposition and the Premier mentioned along the way about $97,000 in savings. So, Premier, I'm just going to take it on good faith that out of the $97,000 you didn't lay off any teachers or nurses to get those $97,000 in savings. Is that a fair assumption?
No, that's not our MO. No.
No, that is. No, actually, it's your MO to accuse everybody else who wants to save money and you say you and your ministers often say the only way to save money is to lay off teachers and nurses. So I guess I could assume you won't be saying that anymore. Is that correct?
No, I would suggest that there's a difference in quantum of a $97,000 savings versus a $4 billion cut to annual operating, which I believe is what was presented in your caucus's alternative budget, which amounts to a little bit under an 8% cut.
It was actually an increase, Premier, respectfully. It just wasn't as fat an increase as what you would put on the next few years. And so you may call it a cut, but we actually increased every department every year. So
it was a $4 billion cut in operating
as compared to the huge increase that the Premier had, Mr. Speaker. So back to the...
All I'm saying
back to the thing. So on the Public Affairs Bureau, getting back to the questions here, what advice to the department was provided to Executive Council by the DDB Canada public relations firm on the sole source contract? April 8th for $44,000.
Right, so I think, which one is that? Is that the sole source?
Yeah.
So is that the one that was, they're the, oh, right, yes, so that particular one, so DDB, as you probably know, is the government agency of record. So as a result of that, to some degree, they don't have to necessarily have their contracts tendered as they do the work of agency of record. Now, in this particular case, the work was a bit different, and so that's why it's shown that way. And it was in relation to what I will refer to simply as a very time-sensitive contract negotiation matter. For that reason, we need to keep it somewhat confidential.
You can't say what the matter was that the taxpayers paid $44,000 for?
It was a time-sensitive matter that needs to remain confidential in the best interest of taxpayers. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. There's a $26,580 contract with an Ontario-based Canadian Mental Health Network dated July 25th, 2016. What did that achieve, please?
Second, I'm just getting these
The contract was for Air Quality Health Index outreach in medical office waiting rooms, which is pretty interesting. So what was achieved by that, please? I'm trying to help you out here by giving you as much detail as I can, Premier.
Sorry, are you sure is that executive council? Because I don't think that's ours.
Okay, we'll keep moving on then if you don't have that one.
Sorry,
No
it's not
worries.
ours. I'm sure it was probably OH&S, I would expect, or Labor. You can maybe ask them.
Okay, I don't know if you're the ministry quote, for helping ministries communicate with and engage Albertans, so I thought you might have an idea. Now, with your Public Affairs Bureau, how strict are you, and what things have you put in place to make sure there's no blurring of the lines between political propaganda and government work informing the public?
Well, we're very clear that their job is to inform the public on matters that the government of Alberta has decided on that are clearly within the purview of Executive Council and the government of Alberta's work. So I think it's fairly clear. The end, really.
Okay,
I think that the definition is pretty clear.
Okay, so they haven't been given AIMCO any instructions on what to invest in or what not to invest in?
Absolutely not. They have not, as we discussed today in question period, nor would anyone
8:13.
ever suggest they did.
At 8:13 p.m. Thank you for that answer, Premier. Now, Premier, you talked to the leader of the official opposition about reducing school fees, and you made comments about you didn't want to reduce school fees for richer areas or something to that effect. Are you planning on income testing school fees? Because that was kind of the suggestion you made, is you want to cut school fees for you don't want to cut school fees for people of high income. So how would you not do that unless you income test, or do you have some other method for sorting who's rich enough to pay school fees and who's not?
No, quite the opposite. And in fact, that's why we're saying that the matter is very complex. So in fact, when we did the 25% reduction, everyone got the benefit of the 25% reduction regardless of their income and regardless of the amount of fees they were previously paying. But the point that we're making is that the school fee practice around the province has been allowed to develop, as you probably know, under your watch previously for years. It's developed very unevenly across the province, and B, it's developed way out of control such that we have these crazy high school fees. And it's developed unevenly, though, and all I'm saying is that it's developed unevenly.
Respectfully, because we allowed duly elected school boards to make decisions on that, which was within their purview as being duly elected.
And because you allowed them to do that, and so you probably didn't hear, and maybe that's why you are where you are now. But the fact of the matter is that Alberta families and Alberta parents were getting increasingly frustrated and angry at how much money they had to pay out of their pocket every September simply to be able to send their kids to a public school and participate fairly and equally in that public school experience with their schoolmates, and that parents were feeling that school was becoming actually inaccessible to them in some
So-
cases
so
because the school fees had gone so out of control. So
Premier,
now we're
in
trying
terms
to
of-
undo
in terms
that,
of
but
making
it's
In
complicated.
terms of making it more accessible, is there a line item in the budget somewhere where you replace the $50 million that schools are no longer able to collect?
Well, I would suggest that you raise this in more detail with the Minister of Education and
You
his
just talked
estimates.
at great length about this issue, but you don't want to answer
I
my question
did,
on it. I'm
because
a little
it's
disappointed.
it's a key issue as it relates to
So there's no
my
line item,
government's
there's no line item where you
focus.
replace the $50 million, Premier?
Okay, well, did you want me to finish the answer, or did you want
I'm
to
just
just keep
kind of
doing
hoping
this?
that if you talk at length, you might give me a simple answer.
Mr. McIver, the response
It's hard when
you're
you keep
seeking, you're trying
interrupting.
to seek from the Ministry of Education, and
Sorry,
it's
you
not a
know
line
what?
item within this.
Mr. Chair, I've got little time, and if I'm a little short, I apologize to both you and the Premier, but I've only got 9.5 minutes left.
Okay,
And I'm
so
trying
I
to
would
make the
suggest
most
that you
of it.
let me give you the answer. So first of all, as I've said, the Minister of Education can give you the detailed breakdown, but it was in fact found through in-year savings, through the end of certain grants that were in place, and through changes in terms of internal savings, in-year savings found in the Ministry of Education. So there is no extra line item. It was found internally, and the Ministry of Education can give you more detail around how that happened.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the Premier about the, how many individuals out of the new hires in Alberta have come in from other provinces this year, and how many during 2017 do you expect to hire from outside of Alberta?
I'm sorry, and this is in terms of the jobs created in Alberta?
I'm talking about the new FTEs that are added to the government's overall payroll.
I have no idea. We don't ask people those questions. Historically speaking, Alberta has had a practice and a history of being able to attract people from all over the country to move here and to get jobs here. So I can't tell you in terms of the specific FTEs, because we don't actually hire on that basis.
If only that were so. Mr. Chair, let's talk about the business plan and the targets for satisfaction of ministries with services they receive from Executive Council. The target was 90% for 2016-17 and all future years. And in this year's business plan, it's actually dropped from 90% to 85%. Is there any reason why you're expecting less performance this year and satisfaction than you were hoping to have last year when you did your business plan?
Change the target?
It was just the actual.
Or is it the actual versus?
The targets are based on the actual results of the survey.
No, they're both targets, Premier. One was last year's target for 2017-18, and the other one is this year's target for 2017-18, which has dropped from 90 to 85.
And one went, I'm sorry? Okay. All right, so I'm being told that it was adjusted based on the actual results that we received in the previous year, and
Okay. Is there any strategies that you have to increase the disappointing results then?
well, I don't,
Review.
pardon me?
Fastest to review.
Well, indeed, I have asked officials to review, generally speaking, our performance standards as well as the means of improving the outcomes.
Okay, in consideration of your key strategy 1.1, how many items of advice and support were given to ministries in 2016, and how many do you anticipate providing in 2017?
Sorry, items of advice and support?
Yeah, your page 74, key strategies 1.1,
Measure that. Measure
business plan.
We measure what?
Measure the actual.
We don't actually measure items of advice and support. We measure the satisfaction. They are performance measures report on ministerial activity over a period that saw 4 premiers since these measures were last reported and does not meaningful capture changes in ministerial direction or focus. Okay. Okay. PAB is working on a new and more effective set of performance measures that will more properly reflect both internal as well as public interactions with Executive Council. Most provinces do not, for all of these reasons, report on performance in this way for their executive council. They don't actually report on it really at all.
Okay. So one of your priorities is in having good relations with outside parties, outside governments outside of Alberta. So in that line, are you going to have a truce with Saskatchewan soon and stop taking whacks at the Saskatchewan Premier and government so that you can actually have those good relationships and maybe even get cooperation from them on the Energy East pipeline and a whole raft of other issues that we have? Because the war you have with them right now seems inconsistent with your priority.
We have a very right. We have a very excellent working relationship with our colleagues across the country, and we will continue to do that, and we will work with them on the issues on which there is some strategic alliance. I will grant you that it was not my plan to issue a letter of congratulations to a premier that engaged in a process of trying to steal business from our province when people are suffering from job losses and the worry and anxiety that causes. It was also not my plan to encourage any premier to breach the Northwest Partnership. So those things were things that were not part of my plan and will not be part of my plan.
Okay,
but
so
generally speaking, moving forward, I always remain open to trying to have productive relationships as much as we possibly can. And as you probably know, I'll be chairing the Council of the Federation this summer, and I look forward to being able to work with all of our partners across the country in a productive way.
Good, that's good. It leads into my next question. What's the status, please, of implementing the modernized agreement on internal trade after the Premier's meeting last July? Any progress that you can share with us?
I believe we are,
Yes,
yeah, it's just about,
ready to sign by ministers.
yeah, it's pretty much ready to go, and we're just, there'll be, ministers will be getting together.
So no hope or no good news for Albertans you can share?
April 7th is the signing date, April 7th.
April 7th? So I believe April 7th is the signing date, and I believe it will be, show an excellent process forward where Alberta's interests have been protected, while at the same time moving forward on advancing good trade opportunities.
Okay, thanks, Premier. What will the Executive Council's priorities for preparing Alberta for the implementation of the Canada-European Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement be in 2017? What are you planning to do to get ready for that or to move that forward?
Yeah. Right. So I think, I mean, it's certainly there are some good opportunities for Canada there. I believe that and particularly for Alberta, I believe there's some beef. Alberta beef particularly has some good opportunities there. I would, however, refer you to our Minister of Economic Development and Trade, as he's more directly involved in working on the follow-up to that trade agreement.
Okay, I appreciate you got a minister there, but I'm going to ask what kind of work and consultation are you and Executive Council leading with in respect to the upcoming discussions on equalization and transfer payments, which will have cross-ministerial impacts in Alberta? How are you getting ready for those discussions?
It's a federal review, it's not.
What's that? Oh, really?
It's a federal review,
Yeah.
so that's doing it.
Okay, I'm told it's a federal review. It's not a set of negotiations at this point. So they are
You're not
currently
making any preparations?
in the process of reviewing it. And we'll certainly, as there is an opportunity for the provincial governments to engage, we, like all provincial governments, will look at ways in which we can improve Alberta's position relative to other provinces. But again, as I know this won't come as a new thing to you, but we are just coming off of almost a decade where we had a Conservative government in Alberta and a Conservative government in Ottawa, and we failed to make, well, except that we failed to make a lot of progress on that issue. And so any concerns that people might have around equalization or around the fiscal imbalance are concerns that one might have seen addressed by previous Conservative governments at one of the two levels.
Okay, Premier, you're the minister responsible for planning on the UNDRIP. Is there any significant efforts that you're going to make for First Nations people in 2017?
Well, as you know, And we were very proud that one of the key things that we were able to introduce in this budget was our significant infrastructure investment with respect to ensuring clean water for all of the First Nations that currently don't have access to it. Because let me tell you, that was something that should have been fixed a long time ago. I'm very proud that we're going to do it.
Okay, thank you. On those things... Oh,
Sorry, I hesitate to interrupt, Mr. McIver, but the allotted time for third party has expired.
Okay, I will, I'll just ask questions, and I know I'll have to wait later for my answers, okay?
Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Premier, we know that, I heard you tell one of your members of your own party that the international investment will come back when the oil price goes up, but that's clearly not true. Shell, Statoil, Murphy, Total are not going to jump back in just because the oil price has gone up after they've stranded very expensive assets. So what do you plan to do to bring international investment back to Alberta that you've driven out during your time in office? Also, how do you plan to prevent the credit rating agencies from further downgrading Alberta in the face of massive deficits and debt that your government is racking up with no repayment plan in the next 5+ years? Performance measures 3A called Public Satisfaction with Government Communications had a last actual in 14-15 of 71%. And targets of 75% going forward. The 15-16 actual dropped to 61%, a big loss in performance, and the 17-18 target has been revised down to 65%. Why is Executive Council so confident about its lack of ability to communicate with the public? Next question, Performance Measure 3B, Public Satisfaction with the Government of Alberta homepage had an actual satisfaction rating of 85% in 14-15, which dropped to 80% in 15-16. With the 17-18 target being revised down from 90 to 85%, I understand that making information harder to find kind of fits, but when are you going to seek help to actually push back up the satisfaction with the government's homepage? Along the lines of communication, how many Albertans did you consult last year about the effectiveness of your communications? And on last year, on page EF 334, it estimates, the Deputy Premier said the Executive Council learned about how to consult effectively, yet there remains widespread dissatisfaction with the lack of progress on the standard setting consultations for Bill 6. Since your government didn't effectively address that in 2016, how do you plan to fix that in 2017? On page 76 of your business plan states the ministry will conduct regular analysis of its outward-facing services and materials to identify issues and meet the demands of Albertans. Who have you been listening to for the last 2 years since it was not regular Albertans? Also on that area, there are 10 key strategies and 5 arts of performance measures. Why are there still no significant new performance measures this year to show progress on all the key strategies and desired outcomes that went unmeasured last year? Moving on, which performance measures are you using to show that Executive Council is providing high-quality leadership and decision-making support, the goals stated in your ministry overview? For example, how are you measuring the clarity of how you're communicating decisions and policies to ministries and frontline staff? Next, the strategic context of your business plan refers to last year's second jobs plan, another failed one. How many of the promised 100,000 jobs have been created? Where have they been created? And how does this budget support Executive Council's leadership of the ministries to create the 100,000 jobs rather than have another failed jobs plan? Moving on, can you quantify the impacts of last year's decision to extend EI benefits for Edmontonians, and will that plan be extended for Edmontonians once it runs out in July of this year? And how many Albertans do you expect to still be unemployed at that time? Moving on, page 74 of your business plan refers to coordination and communication of policies and initiatives identified by ministries. Could you please provide a breakdown of the numbers of policies and initiatives originating from each ministry and the number of those policies and initiatives that Executive Council has supported? Moving on, page 74 of your business plan mentions that Executive Council shares in the strategic risks identified by ministries due to its coordination and policy role. Which specific other ministry strategic risks did Executive Council help to mitigate in 2016, and which strategic risks will Executive Council help to mitigate in 2017? Also missing from your business plan is your supposedly comprehensive climate leadership plan. Does that plan not need government-wide leadership? Or is it a green slush fund? If it's not an unaccountable green slush fund. I'm sure, Premier, you can provide this committee with the details about how Executive Council has directed ministries on the use of revenues from the carbon tax, and when can we expect to see those details? Premier, thank you. For performance measure 3A. No, actually, I covered that one. No, the other thing that I wanted to cover with the Premier is, knowing that time is tight here, there's, the Premier talked about...
Apologize to interrupt, Mr. McIver. I'll allow you to catch a breath here, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for the item for business has concluded.